Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Call Talk for Wednesday, July 21st. This is our 25th episode and our one-year anniversary. Our topic today is auxiliary time. What should it be used for? During the call, we invite you to ask questions via email at calltalk@benchmarkportal.com, chat on calltalk.tv, or call and ask the host your questions and interact the show. The number to call in is 347-857-3117. Select option 2, and the host will know that you have a question. Everyone who asks a question via email or chat on the show will receive a free copy of Bruce's book, Benchmarking at Its Best, and one person will be chosen at random to win an in-depth reality check benchmarking report valued at $1,500. And now I'd like to introduce the host of Call Talk, Bruce Belfiore.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the one-year anniversary of Call Talk. We really appreciate those of you who've been with us for the year and really appreciate those of you who have been joining us during the course of the year. So we're very happy with the way this has gone and particularly with your participation. So please keep sending in those questions and supporting this show. Today's topic is aux time. What is it and what should it be used for? Now, this could seem like one of the more arcane topics we've covered. One of my colleagues calls it awful aux, but I guarantee you that my guests will bring it to life and provide you with useful ideas. I'm delighted to welcome Thomas Falkowski, who is the Patient Access Director with Allina, the largest healthcare system in Minnesota. He directs centralized contact center services for 11 hospitals and over 70 clinics. Tom's experience spans over 17 years in a variety of roles, including customer service, workforce management, help desk director, and he's also led quality, training, and project management functions in support of customer service. I asked Tom to create an aux audit, and I know you'll find a lot of value in his 5-point program. In fact, after chatting with Tom yesterday, I thought to myself, gosh, aux never seems so awesome. So, Tom, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm happy to be with you.
Okay, great. Well, Tom, let's start with a good definition of this elusive auxiliary time. Can you give that to us?
Sure. Basically, aux time is an agent state when they're logged into an ACD system that's used to make the agent unavailable for incoming distributed calls. And often it's referred to as either aux time, unavailable time, or in some systems, off time. And the purpose of having aux time is to basically manage your workload, some of the non-call activities. It helps you create effective schedules, which will also help you maximize your service level and budget accurately for staffing. Basically, you do need to know everything in the entire work process to be able to manage and make better decisions.
So really, it's a key to, or one of the keys to managing your human resources effectively and efficiency. And I know that you've put together this audit for aux, and maybe you could key us in on point number 1.
All right. Well, the first point is really define how aux will be used in your center, and make sure that your definitions are documented and in actual common use.
Yeah, I mean, that is key, making sure that everybody's on the same page and actually using aux the same way and the right way.
Correct. You know, there's several different ways that you can look at aux, and I know we actually have some interesting discussion points around this, is that I really see aux time into 3 separate buckets. One, and I think this is most used in your benchmarking methodology, is in a paid unproductive type of state. So those aux states really being activities where you're paid but not actually producing the calls or other activity. Good examples of those would be break time, meeting time, training, and when you start to get more detailed, it might even include like a bio break, coaching, or agent prep time. Then as another bucket, which aux time is used for, is actually a paid productive time. And again, depending on how much detail you want to use in your center, you might break down project time into other buckets such as correspondence, customer email, manual processing, research, order entry, or scanning. Basically, other tasks that you want to have a finite breakdown of, but not necessarily just all lumped together.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final function of Aux is to capture one unpaid function as well, which is lunch. And a lot of contact centers will basically have agents log off for lunch. But when you use a workforce management tool, more than likely your area or contact center will actually stay logged in, but go into an Aux lunch function. Even
right.
though it's unpaid, you still want to actually manage adherence to the schedule, and so you still use it as a logged in state.
Okay, and that's great. Basically, the three separate buckets that you talked about, the paid unproductive, the paid productive, and the unpaid lunch, for instance, time, are areas that for purposes of overall human resources management are key areas. And as you mentioned in our discussion before, it sort of lets you know what everybody's doing all the time, so that there are no sort of black holes where you don't know what people are doing. Or if there are black holes, they're because people are misusing things, and we'll talk about that more later. And for benchmarking purposes, we use aux time as one of the efficiency metrics, that is to say cost-related metrics, in our balanced scorecard of efficiency, that is to say cost-related metrics, and on the other side of the equation, the effectiveness or quality-related metrics. And so for that purpose, what we ask people to do, according to our glossary, is to really carve out the paid unproductive time, the break, meeting, training, coaching, prep time, from the rest, and utilize that as your aux time. So I think that this is really good because it brings to our audience also the fact that aux time can have different calculations for different purposes. And actually, if you have a system that is giving you all of the buckets that you talked about, Tom, then it's very easy to carve out the paid unproductive time for purposes of benchmarking. And it's really not a hard thing to do, and we can always help somebody do that. The paid productive time you were talking about, which might have to do with emails, correspondence, manual processing, that type of thing, really needs to be taken out of our benchmarking for our inbound customer service survey, because that really concentrates on the telephone work. And we don't want you to be penalized when you're benchmarking yourself by having too much of that other stuff mixed in there. So, yeah, great. Very good to sort of clarify that right up front. Yeah, you've got some other good points under this audit point number one as well, Tom.
Right. Well, yes, I think it's very easy to become, I guess, over-detailed in this process when you start to think about how you have your people spend their time. So there's definitely a balancing act of keeping it simple as possible to make sure that it's really usable. I know I've seen it's similar to when people use too many wrap-up codes for calls. Oftentimes they use too many aux codes as well, and it really leads to agent confusion. Ultimately, what an agent will do is push the same button all of the time, and so you lose the accuracy of what you're trying to capture. And another thing that you really want to be able to do with aux time to make it easy on the agent is to program feature buttons with those codes and have them either labeled on the phone, or if you're using a CTI system and you can code your different work states, be sure you put an icon with that aux code as well. So those will enable you to actually get usable data.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So really, on this audit point number one, the key things are define, document, and make sure that things are in common use. Would you say that really sums up those this audit point one, Tom?
Yep, very well.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on then to audit point number two.
Well, point number two is, after you've made those definitions, is to set targets for each of those specific work states, and then to make sure that you communicate those to your whole center, your teams, and also the individuals who are doing the work. It's actually fairly easy to create estimates on how much time should be spent in an activity, and it's really relatively simple with some of your work roles, such as 2 15-minute breaks in a day will allow you to figure out what percentage or what amount of time they should spend in a break time. Same thing with lunch or perhaps even meetings that you've pre-scheduled. So all of those different times can be then communicated to the staff. And ultimately, what I like to do in my centers is to make sure that the agents understand that by writing it into their goals and their accountabilities. And one other great place to put it in is on coaching forums. So if you have weekly or monthly coaching meetings with your staff, you can always bring up those points. So if it's written on your form, it'll end up being a good coaching point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this really does something that most centers don't do, which is raise aux as a metric to the level of consciousness of the agents. Now, not in terms of a technical thing where they push a button to put themselves in there, but as something that's important to be measured and that actually reflects on their performance and the productivity of the center. So I think that kind of communication is just so important with agents so that they really are brought into the management picture.
Right. When the agent knows why it's important to your company and to themselves, then they'll do the activities that you hope to do. And one other way that you can end up communicating with your staff may actually be through your workforce management package or software that's giving them their schedules. And this is really common that the management needs to work with your workforce management group, if you have one of those, to basically create what are the rules on when these aux time processes are going to happen. And the best workforce management tools actually will balance and place those aux activities to help you achieve your service level targets as well.
Very important point. Yeah, and I think it's also something where sometimes the training you feel that you have to do with your agents, you also have to do with your workforce management people, because particularly if you have somebody who's come from another center, a workforce management pro, but has definite ideas about how these various metrics, including or functions, including aux time, are supposed to be used, you sometimes have to spend time, a real sit-down session, to convince them that they need to treat things in a different way or measure things in a different way.
Definitely. So basically, the main thing again here is by communicating, you're making sure everyone will use the right state, and the data that you're collecting is what you hoped it would be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, should we move on to audit point 3 then?
Well, the next point is really about just measure, coach, and control. And again, it's aux time, when it's not managed, ends up getting out of control very easily. So some things you should do is first use real-time reporting. And, that's one of those things where you want supervisors, or if you have a workforce management team that does real-time management, to be watching what states the agents are in and also the length of time that they're in states. It's very easy to see that if someone's going over an event such as a break, that you start to track them down and see what they're doing, get them back into the state that you really want them to be. And it's important that you actually include aux reports in your daily, weekly, and monthly metrics. It's oftentimes they come out of a different set of reports, not out of your regular call reports. They're more based off of the agent performance side. But when you report on the hours, be sure you break down how those hours were actually spent. And if you look at them, have supervisors look at them at the individual level, and then management focus on the team or center level, be sure you investigate when you start to have variances.
Well, in fact, if you find that there's too much time, too much project time or other things, do you find that there's some problems that it could represent? And what has your experience shown with regard to looking into that and what you have found?
Well, I see agents use ox time incorrectly often when they're struggling. For example, a different call type that they weren't prepared for arrives. They'll often go into an ox state and start walking around trying to seek that answer. And that's one thing that happens. But also, you see variances in ox time when there's other flaws, like in perhaps the workflow. So that they know they need to take more time to get something done, they'll panic and use the ox state incorrectly.
Right. Yeah, and also sometimes when you have situations where there's pre-programmed after-call work time, then people will say, okay, I've only got 10 seconds between calls or 8 seconds or something, so I'm going to put people in aux time while I finish their record. That's really an incorrect use of aux time, and the kind of thing you discover when you do side-by-sides, as we oftentimes do when we go on site, and that has led to a lot of sort of restructuring of use of aux, of hold, et cetera, and of after-call work time to make it more rational within the center and to give managers better metrics in terms of accuracy. Okay, great. Well, let's move on to audit point number 4. Tell us about that.
Well, the next point is really to monitor for adverse impacts. And although aux time is one of those things that most managers want to avoid, as you had mentioned at the beginning of the show, what happens when you become too restrictive with your agents is that they'll end up taking it out on the callers in some way or another. And it may be that they're looking to lengthen the call time by actually pausing with the caller or basically maybe doing other activities in a call that you don't want them to do. So you can see that if you either listen to the call and you hear delays, or perhaps you are watching screens and watching someone go back and do other call activities or other activities on the call. One of the other, this is also a common area where agents know how to work the system of how to basically distribute calls to other people. So it becomes a work avoidance issue when an agent might actually continually hit an aux button for just a real quick moment and basically make other members of the team look more available or having been available longer in the system. And therefore they kind of keep avoiding calls by just hitting that aux button for just a moment and flashing back in.
No, agents don't do that, do they, Tom?
Ones who think they're too smart do, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and as soon as people know that their system goes for the longest waiting agent and that they can sort of stump the system by putting themselves in aux for a second or, whatever, and then coming out again, then they'll do that. And so you have to definitely monitor for that, make sure that people aren't unfairly sloughing off work onto others. Okay, well, absolutely. And tell us also about what happens in cases of centers that have escalation teams and seniors or team leads that, take the escalated calls.
Right. I've been in teams or been in centers where we had such high expectations for the new agents or the primary call takers that they had to have 90+% available time or productive time, and so they're really working themselves to death. But then they'll have calls that are transferred to either an escalation team or a senior team, maybe even a lead group. But those people take the more difficult calls, but often have very different expectations for aux. So those teams might be in a aux state the majority of their day, and it turns your really productive best agents into the least productive people that you may have, because no one's really watching that group of people with the same set of eyes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen that myself, actually, in one of our centers of excellence. I went in to do a recertification at one point, sat down with the agents for face-to-face with a group of agents, and just asked them about some things. And one of the things that came out was that a couple of the team leads who had been excellent agents and therefore had been promoted were now abusing the extra time that they had in terms of sort of going around and helping people, but also going around and talking and sort of doing other things. So this is a good one to watch, and to make sure that really you are coaching the people you put into those positions to avoid it, to make sure that they know they're being checked in some way or another, and that they're being made responsible for not abusing this this new privilege that they have.
Right, and it makes sure that your overall contact center is hitting your targets for productive time.
Right. Okay, good. So audit point 4 is monitor for adverse impacts that come from the whole way in which ox time is measured. Well, let's move on to point number 5, because then we've got some questions we'd like to have answered too. So this is analyze and improve. Tell us about that in a minute or so.
Well, great. What we had talked about before is that often when you start to see variances in ox times, it is usually tending to be problem related, and it may be that you're actually starting to see issues where you're understaffed for a period of time, and the only way that people can tolerate that is to go into an unavailable state. When staff is really new or lacks training, a lot of times they'll expand the amount of ox time that they have. But as we had talked about before, it could also mean that there's a defect in either the service that you're offering that might have just occurred, and if you notice that variance quickly, you can address it and improve it. But basically, this is one of those great areas when you use your workforce management team to provide the analytics and help you improve the usage of ox time, recommending the best time slots for things to happen, scheduling meetings, and those different activities. There's also times where I think you'll have to pay attention, especially in peak hours of the day, where there's maybe a no ox type of rule that you actually need hands available. So that's one of those things to be watching for, is that people who are in ox are basically your reserve force. So make sure people know that they're the reserve force and that you might actually ask them to come out of whatever activity that they're doing to help when a customer is waiting.
Okay, that's a good point. They're sort of the National Guard of the situation, aren't they? They can be called into service to help fight the battles that need to be fought. So, yeah, that's a very good point. Any other final points with regard to the analyze and improve audit point number 5, Tom?
Well, again, I think it's one of the important things is, again, if you're counting on people to move themselves out of a ox state, perhaps you have cue lights that blink or some other signs, and you're hoping that they'll just come out of that time. You can't always count on that to happen. So you might have to take a real active role, again, with that real-time management to call those people back to work.
Okay, great. Well, listen, we have some questions here, so I'd like to get to those before the half hour runs out. So, Sean, what do we have there?
Our first question comes from Kevin. Before I get to it, I'd like to remind the audience you can use the chat function if you're logged into calltalk.tv, call in, or email us your questions. Kevin asks, many of our agents complete call tasks while they are in aux unavailable state. It allows them to finish up the work they are doing without getting, it's a multi-part question, without getting to another call. What is the difference between using after-call work and using aux to do this function?
Okay, good one. Okay, over to you, Tom.
Well, again, it's important to make a distinction between after-call work and aux time, even though from the agent perspective, it's doing the same thing of blocking them from receiving another call. Really, you want to use after-call work to be very closely synchronized with the incoming call, because you want to be able to capture an overall call length so that when you're using, again, a staffing model, you'll be plugging in your overall contact length or average handling time to generate the number of staff you may need. But aux time, though, is different in that it's really more, I guess you'd say, a straight line activity that you want to budget for. So to accurately prepare your staffing model, you want to keep the two activities separate, the productive work time versus what might be, again, a straight line batch function.
So important. When you misuse these different functions and different metrics, then it does mess up your scheduling and your projections in a way that can be really problematic. And we see that after-call work time gets stuck into aux. Sometimes it gets stuck into hold time because people just put calls on hold instead of waiting until after the call. And so you're absolutely right, Tom. It's really important to have accuracy in the recording of these things and to make sure that your agents are helping and that your systems are allowing your agents to be accurate. So, okay, good question, good answer. Sean, do we have another one?
We do. This person didn't leave a name. Our center has never used detailed aux codes before. How many should we start with, and which codes will give me the most information to work with?
Good question. Tom?
Well, good. Again, a lot of centers start with just one, and one is too little. So they might just have an aux unavailable work state. But I would recommend that you have a minimum of 3, but perhaps a little bit more if your center needs it. But for sure you'll want to capture your break time, because again, that's a paid time that you definitely want to be able to control. I also would recommend that you use a project time, again, for perhaps those straight line functions that you might be doing that are, again, something calculable. And then finally, again, my preference is to keep agents logged in over lunch. So I like to see the aux lunch function as well.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Sean, do we have another question there?
That's all I have for right now.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about with regard to aux time and the critical nature of making sure that things are properly categorized in terms of the use of time. In other words, think of what, Tom, you said at the very beginning, and that is that define how aux time will be used in your center, make sure that it's documented, and make sure that there's common use by everyone in terms of this whole aux time metric. And if it's going to be a useful management metric, you really do have to make sure that you have a complete process, that you've thought through what your needs are, that you've communicated, that you've documented it properly, and that you've communicated it throughout your organization and made sure that people are actually following it. Tom, you may have some experience or a story to tell with regard to that.
Well, actually, it was just even about 2 weeks ago. I went to one of our smaller locations, and there was a small group of sales representatives who were asking me specifically about when they should use aux and how they should use it. And interesting enough, they actually had a sheet of paper one of the agents pulled out that was sitting on their desk, and on it was a thick layer of dust. And so as we talked about it, he proudly pulled out this sheet with all of the dust on it and mentioned, "Oh, I see how you use this now." And prior to that point, he was always using just an aux button that did not give any details. And so even his supervisor, who was standing there, again said, "Well, that sounds really smart. We should be using that information for our goal going forward." So just to see that there was a sheet of paper that was several years old on the top of a pile just means, again, it has to be in active use, and that the supervisor actually needs to be involved with monitoring and coaching his people to actually have it effectively used.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, very, very good points, Tom. And let's see, so we're getting to the bottom of the hour, but Sean has another question. So, Sean, why don't we bring that forward?
This question came from Chris. What mode do you recommend for making a callback to customer to correct a service issue?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, a callback to a customer ends up being kind of a lesser-known aux state as well, and that you'll be in an aux-out mode. Oftentimes, if we have callbacks happening, and again, it does depend on the size of your center, you might want to group those activities so that they can actually go through them at a good clip. However, that's maybe not realistic, and so again, if you have callback times that are really set by your customer, for example, they want to call back at a certain time, basically you will get details, call handling details about extension out calls. Again, your extension out reports will typically talk about how many outbound calls you attempted and the duration of those contacts. I look at outbound call activity similar to inbound call activity, and for me, I like to use overall contact length versus just inbound contact length for determining staffing needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, listen, Tom, a lot of good, rich content here in terms of this auxiliary time metric. So thank you very much for the input and for being with us on the show today. And I'd like to hand things over to Sean because we're at the bottom of the hour and out of time.
I wanted to thank our host, Tom, as well. Thank you for all your great insights to the show. Thanks for all the participants and their questions. It was a great show. Don't forget you can sign up for Reality Check and compare your aux time to peers in your industry. Our winner today of the in-depth Reality Check is from chat, Chris. Please send an email at calltalk@benchmarkportal.com, and we will get you your free in-depth Reality Check. The topic for our next show on August 4th is workforce management, and our co-host is Adam Sinkowski. Thanks again for your time today, and have a great day.